Thank you, Patrick, for that great discussion on breakthrough Air Force technology and leads into our next discussion. My name is James Hansen, and I'm the Group Publisher of Federal and Technology Markets at GovExec. It is my great pleasure to be here today with Mike Boera, the Vice President and Air Force Strategic Account Executive for Leidos. Bo, thank you for being here with me today.
James, great to be here with you.
Before we dive into it, can you tell our audience just a little bit more about your background and your role at Leidos?
You bet. So as the Strategic Account Executive at Leidos, I basically help connect dots across the company and help the company businesses connect to both the Air Force and Space Force customer at the senior level, at the strategic level, to help with pursuits, to help with businesses, and really to help the warfighter with capability that I think Leidos brings to the fight. I wear Leidos purple, and I always tell my bosses that, but I'll always bleed Air Force blue. Having spent almost 33 years in the United States Air Force, all in most of it in the operational side of the house, fighter pilot, Air Operations Center Commander, Director Requirements at Air Combat Command, Deputy J3 at PACOM, Director of Requirements at Air Combat Command, and then I finished off as the programmer for the United States Air Force. So I've really been exposed to a lot of, especially on the C2 side of the house, from a tactical edge perspective all the way up through the programming perspective of it in the United States Air Force. I've loved my heritage with the Air Force, but I really love what the Leidos company brings to the fight for the warfighter. Thank you.
That's fantastic, and thank you for your service. So let's jump into it then. The Department of Defense recently declared it now has a North Star, with the Secretary of Defense signing the Joint All-Domain Command and Control Strategy. However, some architects say that a single network is a failing architecture. Why is that, and what is the right approach to ensure that North Star declaration?
Well, first, again, I'll reemphasize that I come at this from an operational perspective. I'm not your chief technology officer. I'm not your joint interface control officer. I'm not your real engineer, if you will, on this. But from an operational perspective, I think that North Star is so important that DoD has put out, which is really the game changer in all of this from what I've seen in yesteryear. A little bit of history, as an Air Operations Center commander, I relied on my Joint Interface Control Officer, my JICO, my ACOMs, which are my Air Communications Squadron. They were my MVPs, and that's not min viable product. That's most valuable players in the Air Operations Center. They kludged together 40 to 45 disparate software efforts into one weapon system, that is the AOC, the Falconer weapon system. And the Air Force basically was the King Kong of C2, if you will, with that weapon system. Over time, it's become more and more important that the services need to be a little bit more connected in order to effects on the right target at the right time and place. About 4.5 to 5 years ago, the then Air Force Chief of Staff, General Goldfein, mentioned multi-domain C2 as one of his three big rocks. He put a flag in the ground that said, we got to get after this, connecting the forces. And based on his experience as the AFCENT commander, as well as the director of the Joint Staff, that really got the ball rolling. And whether the Air Force was right in its approach to it at the time, with taking airborne battle management system, changing to advanced battle management systems, the J8 Joint Stars, if you will, into a broader set of battle management command and control, that's a question for another time. But the other services realize the importance of connectivity. The Army has since moved out with Project Convergence, the Navy with Project Overmatch, the Air Force with its Advanced Battle Management System, or ABMS. But DoD now has given the services the North Star with that strategy and said, hey, here's a set of requirements, in essence, probably going to come out with some standards. where you all have to meet these requirements and standards so that we can connect the field across the services and across the domains. Whether that is a single network, remains to be seen. I'm not necessarily a fan of a single network. I think it could be a single point failure, but the fact remains you need to have standards and requirements that are somewhat similar. Each of the services will maintain some of their priority missions that their command and control has been set up to accomplish, so that they are the best. We have the best Army, the best Navy, the best Air Force, the best Space Force. There's no doubt there's value in that. But being able to connect with the right interfaces, APIs, application program interfaces, is going to be key. Gateways will be key in the future for Joint All-Domain C2 to advance. The technologies will always change at different times. So I don't see how you get one big bang solution set at one point in time. I think that would just lead to failure.
Well, and we'll get into that a little bit deeper as well. And I think that, leads into kind of my next question. The Director of Requirements and Resources at the J8 with the Indo-Pacific Command recently asked if the challenge with JADC2 is really joint, or is it service all-domain command and control? Meaning, essentially, is it a service-based strategy, or is it truly a joint strategy? And why is joint so hard to achieve?
Yeah, well, Dr. Kavili or Dr. K, the Indo-PACOM J8, I actually was listening to that session with him. And as an aside, he said his greatest frustration when I asked the question about his greatest frustration as the J8 in his time in the seat, it was about getting programs to the field. He said, on average, he looked from his time frame back in 2007, which is the same time frame I overlapped with him at then PACOM when I was the deputy J3, up until now. And he said the average time was 3 years. So that plays into how Joint All-Domain C2 may evolve. To his SADC point, or Service All-Domain C2 emphasis, there's probably some truth there. Again, back to my prior comment about the Air Force going after ABMS, the Navy with Project Overmatch, the Army with Project Convergence, all trying to get their house in order, there's a lot of goodness with that. And so that, again, if you work the gateways and the APIs and you use the Joint Staff directives on the requirement side of the house or standard side of the house that they need to fit within, I think that in time that the Joint All-Domain C2 effort will evolve. The U.S. military services writ large are so, we're coming at this from, very mature services, huge services. This isn't a simple problem to solve. We've seen that with huge programs, joint programs across the services that just failed under their own weight. And so you need to try to avoid that with this. So having the services getting their own house in order, and then making sure the connectivity is there across them with the right APIs, gateways, whatever the case may be, and allow it to evolve over time, I think is a positive movement. Ultimately the systems do need to link together, and I think that as you bring in things like trusted AI, ML, automation to address some of the touch points that are out there to help reduce time for right effects on the right target at the right time and place, I think will happen. So I'm going back to my experience as an AOC commander almost 2 decades ago to where we are today, and it's positive. If you look at it in a just 1 week, 1 month, 1 year timeframes, you can get very frustrated early that we're not going anywhere. I think the services are going in a positive direction, and with the Joint Staff and DoD guidance now that hasn't been there in the past, realizing the importance of that connectivity across the services, we will see great advances on this in the future.
So if we extend Dr. K's 3 years out to 5 years, what would be the metrics for determined success? And I guess we could look at that both from a service and from a joint perspective.
Well, I think that the the metric that was used yesteryear is the same metric that we'll look at in the future. Again, I'm going to go back to, can I get the right effect on the right target at the right time and place? And that can be either in a deliberate manner, in a very deliberate planning process. Here's a target, a fixed target that you got to go after, or a dynamic nature. I would venture to guess, I don't have facts in front of me, that during times like Desert Storm, Allied Force, and those combat experiences of our generation, that your deliberate forces on an air tasking order, an integrated tasking order, they were probably 80 to 85% pre-planned. Here's your target. Here's the time we needed to hit it. Here's where the target is. And you had 15 to 20% that were dynamic, which meant aircraft that have capability go to a certain piece of the sky, and we're waiting for those fleeting targets, or we anticipate potential troops in contact, closer support, and they have to go to that fleeting target when it pops up through battle management, through airborne ISR. You get notice. Today, or certainly 5 years from now, that there's probably a role reversal. You're probably going to have 15 to 20% pre-planned targets, and about 85 to 80 to 85% that are going to be dynamic in nature, because all forces are going to be mobile. They're going to come out from hiding places. They're going to shoot. They're going to go back into hiding places. And I know we keep talking about like kinetic or combat, but this could apply to humanitarian, a lot of scenarios. So your metric is still time. How much time did it take to accomplish the objectives to get an effect on a target area? And that was true 20 years ago, 30 years ago. It's just that time is shrinking. It is measured sometimes now in seconds and minutes, and versus the days or weeks that yesterday's airmen and guardians and soldiers, sailors, Marines were all used to. So we're going to have to bring trusted AI technology into play on that, to bring automation. Just this morning, I'm reading an article on AI, algorithmic warfare, and that's going to come into play. Commanders are going to have to build trust and confidence with trusted AI, ML being experimented with, exercised, so that you can work out the biases, that you can make sure there's rigor in it, resiliencies in it, probably using some trusted zero trust type of principles. And yet I know there's a lot of challenges with zero trust and actually getting the right players, in play. So those engineers and the CTOs will, still have to sort through that. But that's the type of, evolution that needs to happen here. The General Harigian at USAFE Command, really did a nice job. He came out with a chart, and in an unclassified nature, you could say that it highlighted where all the man in the loop touch points were versus man on the loop touch points. And that's pretty critical. If you can highlight where all those points are, then you can actually start attacking those points in order to reduce the time that it takes to get effects on target. And so I think that's a great place to start. And you just start chipping away. It's like singles wins. Okay, I'm not going to get the huge home run right off the bat, but I can get these singles wins, and I can start to work that metric down. Yeah,
absolutely. And so what role does industry play on this? You touched on a number of things right there in terms of like AI, automation capabilities, certainly, from a cybersecurity, with all of these additional sensors and shooters on a single network, that increases, the threat vector and vulnerabilities for our adversaries. So, I mean, there are challenges. It is, when you look at a enterprise, the scale of the Air Force, the Department of Defense, the complexity is just mind-boggling. I'm thankful for people like you that have kept us protected for all these years. But like, what role can industry play in supporting, JADC2?
Well, you hit on one important topic right there, and that was scale across an enterprise. And so, first, I am a firm believer in the small businesses that bring phenomenal innovation to the fight, and some of that has been put into play. But some of the mid-tier companies, and I always call Leidos a big, small, or a small, big, and then you have the OEMs. They have some great innovation they can bring to the fight too. But the difference between the Leidoses and the OEMs of the world, we actually know how to scale across an enterprise, and so that industry, that's important, I think, for the warfighter to keep in mind. I think there have been some instances where they had great innovation and whatever, but it just couldn't be scaled to a global, to the global sense that is the United States Air Force, the United States Space Force, for certain. But as Joint All-Domain C2 evolves, the trusted AI, ML methodology and technology that a company like Leidos brings to the fight, vitally important to it. The algorithm builds, the interfaces that are agnostic to what's being connected together, that are true open mission system interfaces. Companies that don't bring IP to the fight necessarily, like an OEM might, really are attractive in this environment at Joint All-Domain C2 and connecting the force. And so that's what that's what the warfighters need to seek from industry. That open dialogue with industry is so important, so that everyone's taking the limited dollars that they have and putting it at the right place at the right time against the right problem set. And so if we're having that dialogue, and the services are putting some money toward R&D in a certain area, and we can support that with our own R&D IRAD dollars, I think that is a key to helping this accelerate along the lines of what the current Chief of Staff of the Air Force talks about: accelerate, change, or lose. And I think there's much truth to that. And the only way to get after it is to keep the open dialogue and to make sure you don't close your blinds to what both small business innovation, mid-sized companies, and OEMs bring to the fight.
Thank you very much for that, Bo, and thank you for this conversation. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have today, but I want to thank our audience for joining us. I want to thank Leidos for being one of our elite underwriters for the State of Defense and State of the Air Force, our event series. If you want to learn more, please visit Leidos and our resource center. For GovExec, I'm James Hansen. Please stay tuned. You do not want to miss our next session with the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General Charles Q. Brown, Jr.